Yeah, no, it's wild because here where I am, the Libby Dam, it's this huge hydroelectric dam here in the northwest corner of Montana, and it provides electricity for not only here where I live, but Colorado, Utah, and other cities. And it would be interesting to see, if that trend continues, how is that going to affect the alpine dams, like the one I'm talking about? Because if it gets to where that you just you can't turn the engines, then what's going to happen to the energy infrastructure here in the country? Maybe we should start looking at these things called nuclear power plants and stop damming up the water and let the nature actually work the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, well, dams are definitely, dams are bad. I mean, except when they're for flood control. And even then, I'm not really sure. I mean, it might be that places that get flooded are meant to get flooded, and we should just move away from them. I mean, you kind of like fighting nature is generally bad.
No, I completely agree, and I mean, it's just I don't know. I think that people keep on thinking that they know better, that we are the masters of our own fate. We can bend the earth to our will. We can kind of quote Genesis. You can be as gods. I think that's the mentality that a lot of people have. It's just like we are the dominant species. We will do whatever we want, and if the earth doesn't like it, we will force it to comply. And I don't really know how well that's going to work.
So Robbie, I mean, before we move on to our main topic this morning, you're a Christian. How do you feel about what you just referred to is sometimes called the dominionism, right? The idea, like it's sort of right out of the book of Genesis, that where God basically says, "I made everything for you, all the plants, the animals, the universe. I made it for you, you humans, to use as you will." And that's been interpreted by some Christians as saying, that we have dominion over the earth. Everything's been put here for us to eat or whatever. How do you feel about? Do you think that's apostasy, or do you think that's an accurate translation of the Bible?
I think it's accurate, but here's the thing, though: is like, no, whenever God created Adam, he was a gardener. So yes, we do have dominion over the earth, but we are supposed to be stewards. Like one of the things, like if you read through like those old boring books in the Old Testament, like Leviticus, that people just don't like to read because of how dry they are. Like the Bible is very clear. Like if you are going to get eggs from a nest, you don't kill the mama bird. So I mean so there are very strict things about being a steward of your environment. Use the environment, yes, that's what it's there for, but be a steward of it. Don't just go rape, pillage, and just destroy everything for grins and giggles.
Okay. I got to agree with that. All right, so let's move on. Donald Trump has been saying, he said throughout the campaign, and he also has been repeating in recent days, that he'd like to abolish birthright citizenship. And for people who don't know, I'm going to just tee this up, what birthright citizenship. So the U.S. is among 32 countries, mostly here in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, that have birthright citizenship. That means if you're born here, no matter what, like let's say your parents are changing planes, the plane and whatever, and your mom was 9 months pregnant and she drops you like while you're changing planes at Miami International Airport, you are born in the United States and you get a United States passport. Conservatives have long complained that the 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, provides a loophole for so-called anchor babies, of whom there are at least 4 million born to illegal immigrants. In other words, people who, in that situation, where the kid is born here in the U.S., the parents are not. It's called an anchor baby because it's politically and logistically fraught to chuck out, to say, well, leave that baby here, and this baby who has the right to stay here, but you, the parents who take care of it, have to leave. But those numbers are dropping annually. Jus soli, or the right of the soil, is in the crosshairs of the incoming second Trump administration, with the president-elect threatening to eliminate it by executive order now. Without birthright citizenship, however, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people could be forced back into the shadows, refusing to call the police or the fire department for fear of deportation, and become stateless. In France, There are second and even third generation stateless people who couldn't go back home, quote unquote, even if they wanted to. They don't speak the local language. They haven't been there ever in their entire lives. So, Robbie and I have different points of view about this matter. My point of view might surprise some people because I am a lefty. I do think that you're not a nation state unless you guard your borders. I do think that the idea that the Biden administration's policy, completely unexplained and not discussed to the American people, has been a catastrophe of PR, and it was a major contributor to the loss in the election. Basically, it was like they threw the gates open. They didn't explain why, and they let in a bunch of people without checking very carefully, and some of them turned out not to be criminals and bad people. And so that's been catastrophic. That said, I would like to see more legal citizenship. I'd like to see it should be easier to come here because we do need people. So I think we should make it more, easier for people who want to come to the United States to apply and, get a security check and make sure that they're able to work and be, fairly well educated so that they're less likely to end up requiring public support. But this is a nation of immigrants. But I'll tell you, my take on birthright citizenship is that it's a good idea because the alternative is worse. Even though you might end up with anchor babies and stuff, the alternative is really dangerous. And, I have French citizenship through my mom, and it's because she was born there. Now, the thing is, this is an absurdity. I've never lived in France, right, for any length of time. Yet I have a French passport. I can go live in France, work in France, own property in France, start a business in France, open a French bank account. No muss, no fuss. Meanwhile, there are people who came, basically they're in France, like ethnically Algerian, Moroccan, whatever, Senegalese, who came to France like 100 years ago, and they are still undocumented and stateless in France. Most countries in the world have this problem. And so you have these second-class citizens who are off the grid. They can't hold a legitimate job. A lot of them become criminals because that's the only work they can find, or they're just permanently in the underclass and they end up on welfare illegally. They're scamming off the system. They're selling drugs. It's bad for society overall. So that's my take. And there's, of course, we should get into the whole question of the legality of what Donald Trump seeks to do. I don't think he can do this without amending the U.S. Constitution, but
I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer. I have very strong opinions about this, but that's all they are. They are opinions. I'm not a legal scholar. I'm just a guy who lives in the real world, right? So as someone who does read occasionally, okay, I read a lot. One of the things that the 14th Amendment puts out is that it's very specific in its clause about jurisdiction. So for birthright citizenship to take effect, you have the parents had to be in the jurisdiction of the United States. So what does that mean? Like if I go up into Canada, I mean, yes, I'm in their country, but I am not in the jurisdiction of Canada. I'm not a Canadian citizen. I cannot use any of those. I can't vote there. I have no status. There's nothing I can do. I'm not Canadian. I'm not under their jurisdiction. In 1868, when the 14th
Well, I would
Amendment
argue
was
with
ratified,
that. I think you are. I think that's a misinterpretation. Jurisdiction means like if you go to Canada, you're under their jurisdiction. That means, like, for example, if
I'm under their laws.
That's the same thing. That's what that means. So if you commit a crime in Canada, for example, you will be arrested by the Mounties or the local Canadian authorities, and you'll be punished under their laws. And there's no obligation for them to return you to the United States or give you any consideration whatsoever because you're American. You're under their jurisdiction. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that you have any rights in Canada, you have whatever rights. I don't know what rights Canada gives to non-citizens.
I'm not sure.
In the U.S., all constitutional rights apply to everyone, whether they're a citizen or not.
Here's where it gets dicey, and this is why I was saying that would be really. I really wish we had Steve Gill on here because I would love to bounce this off of him or or the dude that he had lunch with the other day, Trump's border czar. That would be that would be huge, because yes, well, no, I am
Trump
under
owner.
their laws. I do have to. I can't, if I go up there and commit murder. Yes, I'm going to be held accountable by their laws. However, I have zero say. I have zero stake in their political system at all, because I'm not a Canadian citizen.
True.
So that's what I mean by jurisdictions, right? I guess it's a division of powers. Like, you have the lowest power, which is if you jaywalk, you're going to get a ticket, versus voting versus making policy. So I'm thinking about it as kind of like a pyramid.
Let me
Maybe I'm
read
using
this
the wrong word.
Yeah, I think it's a misinterpretation of the word jurisdiction. I'm looking online now. Definition of jurisdiction is the legal authority to hear and decide cases or to govern or legislate within a specific area. It also can refer to the territory where a court or government agency has the power to act. So it's not about individuals; it's about the state entity. So So I'm going to read the text of the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, that would include, say, anchor babies, like the scenario that I described, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is the United States. In other words, subject to U.S. control. Okay, they're in the U.S. And I think they put that in because if it happens, let's say in the old Panama Canal zone or some other place, or Guantanamo, right? The U.S. controls Guantanamo, or let's say a U.S. embassy in, Belgrade. That's U.S. It's controlled by the U.S. If you were born inside that embassy, you would be covered by the 14th Amendment. Are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
Right. So now let's look at context, right? Because this is made in 1868. It was after the war between the states, and it was made, let's be honest here, immigration was not a thought here. It was about giving citizenship to slaves, and I can prove it. And I've had this debate several times.
No, that is true.
When this amendment was written, the continental United States, you had the states, and then you had the territories, Montana Territory, Indian Territory, what have you. That was all under the jurisdiction, if you looked at the political map of the United States. Indians were not American citizens. Even though they're born in North America, they were, to your point, technically, yes, they were, an Indian that was born in the Sioux Nation in 1864 was technically, as far as the United States government is concerned, you are in Montana Territory. However, you are not an American citizen.
Correct.
Your parents are not American citizens. You have zero say. And so I'm talking about here is from the context of it. I think that if anyone back then in 1868 would, if we could go back in a time machine and say, hey, 160 years from now, you're going to have some open border schmuck who wants to change the demographics of the country, bring in the third world, crap all over the working class, and they're going to use your amendment to do it. I guarantee you that the people who wrote it would 100% make sure to put in there, this does not include immigration. This is for freed slaves.
Well, I mean, yeah, not to mention, of course, obviously, I mean, the thing is, I think the importation of slaves ended around 1820 or 1815 or something like that.
It did.
But there were still, by 1868, there still would have been a number of them who had been born overseas in Africa or wherever, right? And so they wanted to make sure that those people were considered citizens of the United States, right? That was
and you're making my
purpose.
Point. And that's just the thing. It's just like to say that by virtue of where, like, say if me and my wife, let's just say, for example, we were coming in from China, and we want to do this whole birthing tourism thing, I would wait till she's about ready to pop. I would fly over to France, Belgium, wherever else. I say, okay, honey, pop a squat, pop Junior out, and we're going to stay, because that's
wouldn't
what
work in
do.
France or Belgium. Yeah,
Well,
most European countries don't have birthright citizenship,
well, good
and
on,
it
okay,
causes
good
a
on them.
lot of problems. I
Oh,
mean, like
100%.
I described. I mean, you're going to have problems no matter what, right? So, if you have this, we know what the problems are, right? It's like, sorry, it encourages illegal immigration.
Of course it does.
And on the other hand, if you don't have it, then people are not vested in the system. To me, this is extremely analogous to, the problem of, like, say, driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. I thought that was an absurdity when the idea first came up, but having been hit a couple of times by undocumented illegal immigrants who could not and did not have insurance, I'm pretty grateful for the fact that now New York lets those people get insurance, and that can pay for my car when these people hit it, right?
But how about this though, Ted? How about if that person wasn't here in the first place, so he couldn't hit you? How about that
Well,
job went to an American?
well,
Just
so that's
saying.
then you're getting into the broad issue, which is not to be ignored, of why the borders are open in the first place, and how much, if any, immigration should be allowed into the U.S., which has always been a fraught issue in American
I can answer
history.
that question for you right now, Ted. I can answer that question for you right now. The Republican Party wants it because they want the cheap labor. Let's be honest. As me and you, we've had this conversation before.
That's true.
You have rightly said that inflation is always going to go up. That deflation is the biggest enemy that the corporate whores in DC worry about.
Yeah,
they do not want the cost of living to go down.
Ever.
Well, then as prices go up, how then do you keep wages down? The way that you keep wages down is twofold. One, you import an entire class of people who have no skin in the game, who are here specifically for the purpose of driving wages down, and that impacts people like me who are a member of the working class. That's why,
that's true. That is
true.
That is why they do it.
And it's just we talked to Angie Wong on Friday when she's like, "Oh, well, you have a problem with the insurance company, sue them." How the dusty hell am I going to sue United Healthcare when I make $40,000 a year? How square that peg?
Dude, I don't care
if
you made I don't care if you made $4 million a year. You don't have enough. Happen. You could never have enough money to prevail in court against a company like United Healthcare. Does not matter.
But that's the point, though, is that the immigration comes in to drive wages down. The Democrats like it because, let's be honest, they like the votes. Before Reagan's amnesty in the 80s.
Although they're kind of wrong, because the Democrats have always assumed that, particularly that illegal immigration would be majority Latino, and that at least the second generation of those immigrants would be likely to become Democratic voters. That was always an assumption. We saw in the last election that's not a safe assumption for Democrats.
But it's a pretty solid one, and I'm going to put up two different examples for you. One is California. California used to be reliably red. I'm not going to call this conservative. California is never conservative, but it was a Republican state. And Georgia, which is the deep South amidst the Bible Belt, Atlanta has turned Georgia purple.
It's purple
because of immigration. Virginia is the same thing. Northern Virginia,
Arizona, the land of Barry Goldwater, used to be.
So I mean, it is right. And here's the thing, right? If you are importing a whole new class of voter, why then does either political party have to run on ideas and win your vote and win mine? They don't have to, because you're importing a whole new class, a whole new political class.
Right.
That's where nothing changes.
That's true. I mean, but the thing is, okay, so given the system as we currently have it, okay, well, let's get into Trump, right? So Trump has, I think, some major barriers legally and politically to pull this off. I mean, first of all, politically, he's going to get major pressure from his big donors who prefer open borders, who prefer more immigration, both legal and illegal. They prefer illegal immigrants because illegal immigrants drive down wages more because they can't complain, they can't fight, and they tend to be less skilled and less qualified. So they drag the wages down more, and business loves that. Sure. But So Trump's donors are going to be like, Donald, come on, let's be reasonable. Let's not do that. But then there is this, constitutional amendment issue. He says he's going to pass an executive order to do this. I don't think he can. I think it will be that some immigrant advocacy group is going to go and immediately go to a federal court and get an emergency injunction that will stay that executive order indefinitely until it gets to the Supremes. And even with a 6-3 conservative majority, SCOTUS is going to say the 14th Amendment is clear. Unintended consequences don't matter, right? Second Amendment is a classic example of unintended consequences. The founding fathers didn't think that people would have AR-15s. They thought that they would have muskets so that they could hunt and join a militia to defend their territory. There's a lot of constitutional amendments that have unintended consequences. The point is the law is the amendment is clear. You can't and you can't change it unless you get 3/4 of the states to ratify a change. And we haven't been able to do that really successfully in any meaningful way in 60 years. Right? It's not possible to amend the Constitution anymore.
As far as the Second Amendment goes, I'm pushed back just a little bit because the Constitution says the only necessary institution is the militia. So you got that. So I think that if George Washington knew the AR-15s or AK-47s would be a thing, I think he'd be like, go get them. I'm telling you, if I could go buy a tank right now from Walmart, I 100% would, because I want this. I want the state. Basically, I don't want the federal government to have a monopoly on force, and the entire idea of a well-regulated militia. Kind of going off topic here, I'll go right back to immigration. I'm going to tie this all in. Is the word regulated back when it was written meant well-trained. It was responsibility of the state governors to regulate or train the militias, and the militia was always supposed to be trained to the point what the standing army was. So it was a very strong. They were very fearful of too much centralized power. And as far as immigration goes, now here's the thing, right? If I had it my way, and it's never going to happen, because like I said, the Republican Party left me years ago. You talked about these immigrant right groups. When am I going to have an advocacy group for the people in Gary, Indiana, whose livelihoods have been destroyed because their job has been exported? When will the people in Columbia Falls, Montana, have someone speak up for them because the aluminum plant went away, and so now these towns are dead? When are the people who are legacy Americans, like old-fashioned Americans, black, white, whatever color, who are getting crushed by millions of people being brought in for jobs that quote unquote Americans won't do because they're not getting paid enough? What's going to happen when all those jobs are automated out anyway? And all of a sudden you have millions of people here who don't speak the language, have a different culture. What are they going to do? What happens when all these jobs are automated away?
Well, that's a good question. Look, I think the real dilemma in immigration, is the first generation people who come here, right? They have the hardest time. The second generation, they're Americans, right? They speak fluent English. Their kids, they're as American as you and me.
Sure.
And I think so. The adjustment period, if you look at like the editorial pages of newspapers from the 1870s and 1880s, you'll see the same sort of concerns and complaints about Irish, Italian, and German immigrants, where they're like, they live in, they're insular, they live in their own communities, they don't learn English, they're not like Americanized, they bring their weird costumes, they don't dress like us, they don't act like us, they don't talk like us. And, obviously that's not true anymore, right? The Germans and Italians and Irish and all these other ethnic minorities are now the majority of the country. Over 50% of Americans are descended from Germans. Sure. So, and they, we used to be like basically a bunch of former Brits. Right. The white folks were anyway.
Right. But here's the difference, though, right? Because back in the 1800s, more European immigrants went back home than stayed because there wasn't a welfare state. You can't have open borders and a welfare state. It simply does not work. Second thing is, back then, you had to assimilate. You had to learn English to be able to function. You had to. Nowadays, you don't have to do that. You can come over, drop a baby, get to go to Chinatown, a little Haiti, whatever else. Keep speaking Chinese or Creole or whatever else. Get your $2,000 a month, courtesy of Uncle Sam. Get put up in a nice little hotel room, and you ain't got to do nothing at that point. No, screw that. Absolutely not. Deport them schmucks. Now here's the compromise that I would make. And as you know, I'm a hardliner. If I had it my way, I'd deport the dreamers. I'd send everybody back. But here's a compromise, though, that I would make if the government would actually do it. You're a second generation legal immigrant? Fine. I will give you citizenship. I will give your kids citizenship. 100%, no problem. I want one thing in exchange. Close the freaking border. End it.
Now, if you're not going to closing the border, would you close it and not allow any more immigration, legal immigration? How do you feel about legal immigration?
Legal immigration is fine. Like, for example, if you are a doctor or something like that, and you want to come over, if you're skilled, not a problem. But no, Jose coming over here to pick coffee beans? No, sorry. We have enough bean pickers. I don't need that.
But honestly, as someone who, considers himself skilled at least one thing, talking about politics, I wouldn't be very happy if the U.S. government was importing like talk show hosts from other countries who have a cuter, more charming like English accent than I do, and are competing with me for a job. We have a lot of unemployed and underemployed skilled workers in the United States. We have doctors, lawyers, engineers, computer programmers who are out of work. And they're getting they have to compete against like H-1B foreigners to get jobs.
Oh, absolutely. And now, like I said, that's a compromise that I would make. Me personally, I would end all immigration for 100 years. No one comes in. Fortress America. You seal off the northern border, seal off the southern border, close off the coast. No one comes in. You're freaking done. You can come here to go to Disney, but that's it.
I got to tell you, I think, first of all, I would not do that for the simple reason that we just don't know where the country will be in 50 or 20 years, much less 100. It's bad to have a
nuclear war with Russia. Who the hell knows?
But it's bad to have any policy that sort of like makes it impossible for future generations to have the flexibility to adjust to the possibility of changing circumstances.
Immigration was closed. I can't remember what the name of the act was. But immigration was ended. I want to say late 1880s or 1890s.
Well, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yeah, so they just closed that. They ended immigration up till the 60s.
Well, ish. There was still some people trickling in for sure, but not in the
massive numbers, not in the waves.
No, that's true. And that is true. The thing is, I also kind of think about how many parts of the country have been really enriched by foreign influence. I used to have a talk show at KFI in Los Angeles. It's a big AM talk station. And I was like one of the token lefties on a very conservative station. So most of the callers were conservative. And many of them were nativist. And, and they would say, like, oh, these fucking people, they're ruining everything. And I was like thinking, do you know how boring California would be without like a Mexican influence or Spanish influence? The architecture everything would look like, the set of Poltergeist, like just basically just like identical, like little boxes on the hillside, like really, really bland. The food would suck. Foreigners bring a lot of cross-pollination. And history has proven, you're a student of history, there's like, the Silk Roads, the conflict of the intersection of different cultures generates new innovation, economic growth. You don't want to lose that.
Well, no, but on the other hand, though, you just can't just fling the gates open so everybody just come right on in. Everyone has a right to come here. You're a citizen of the world. Countries don't matter. Borders don't matter.
No, you should check. Anyone who comes in, I want some federal government agency to check them out and know who the fuck they are before they.
But we don't have that.
That's basic.
But we don't have that. And you see, and here's the thing, right? In a perfect world, and to kind of just kind of point this out. Mr. Lee called me a racist in the chat. I'm going to tell you right now, it has nothing to do with being race. This is not a racial thing for me. It is about what is best for the American people. Why should a steel worker in Pennsylvania, or why should a farmer or a rancher in Kansas have to compete against someone who should not even be here? One of the reasons why housing prices keep going up, but it's twofold. One, we keep printing money. Inflation has to go somewhere. So real estate's a good place. The other thing is, if the population went down,
Well,
there'd be more housing.
it's also legal policy. I mean, the tax code, for example, provides you with subsidies for buying, interest on buying a house. If you borrow money to buy rare political buttons on your credit card, that's not going to be subsidized by the government. Your mortgage is subsidized.
Well, no, but the point I'm trying to make is if the population goes down, you have more empty houses. The supply and demand is a thing. It would be more affordable for people to be able to, I don't know, buy a house because there's fewer people. You're not competing with millions and millions of people. How many people have came over illegally over the last 4 years? No one has a freaking clue.
Yeah, the
numbers, it's in the millions.
Vary. It's definitely millions for sure. I mean, the question is also, how do you define illegal, right? I mean, do you include people who followed the rules and like presented themselves at the border and applied for asylum?
Yes,
you're really illegal, because I mean, you follow.
You ain't.
If you filed the if you follow the government's rules, you did what they told you, then you did what they told you, right?
Then let me tell you what President West would do. I'd bring back stay in Mexico. You stay there till a judge sees your case in 4 or 5 years. And if you're, I'm sorry, but no, people have agency in the countries that they live in. They have the ability to change things for the better in the countries in which they are born in. You don't have to come here expecting a handout, expecting Joe Citizen America to bend over, give you everything at the detriment of his kids or grandkids. Sorry, that's not how this works.
Well, I mean, okay, I've got to bring this up, Robbie. When did your parents come? I mean, I assume your people didn't cross the Bering Strait at the end of the last ice age. How did you? What's your background? Where did your people come from?
So my folks, the Wests, from the genealogy that we've done, came back. They went and watched in Virginia in the early 1600s.
Okay.
So that's how long they've been here. So they settled.
So they were basically English colonists.
Yep. They're English colonists. And so what they did is that they settled in what's now West Virginia. When the war between the states broke out, my family split. Some of them went with the South. Some of them stayed with the North. I'm from the Southern branch.
Now, of course, I have a good friend. She's Native American. We've had her on the show once, Valerie. She says, she would say, like, well, your people, they were illegal immigrants. They came to North America without any permission. They didn't talk to the tribal nations. They just showed up and
they conquered them. That's the difference.
Okay,
all through age. And I hate to say this, but I mean, it is the human condition. Making that argument, the Greeks today can make the same argument for their ancestral lands in Anatolia, because they were there first. The Turks came, wiped them out. The Jews, they said they have the right of return for Israel, because you have people who are whiter than me with red hair and freckles saying that my ancestor herded cattle back here 3,000 years ago. I get to come back because of a promise that was made to Abraham. Sorry, that's not what that means. But that's the argument that's said that's there. I mean, migration happens. Nations go to war.
You're kind of in a backhanded way, and we should like wrap it up here. You're kind of giving advice to migrants that maybe they should conquer us, and then we won't have anything to say about it.
Tell you what, they want to fight it out. Come on up here. We'll see you guys more guns. Bring it.
All right. I think this was a great conversation. I'm glad we had it. I am really, truly.
Well, it needs to be had. And now here's the thing. And Lee, I'll tell you right now, I'm not a racist. I'm not a bigot. What I am is an American. What I am is a father. I have an obligation to my kids. I have an obligation to my grandkids that ain't born yet. My obligation is to leave them with a country better than the one that they found. And if that means pointing out that the fact that we have zero obligation to import the third world because of some kind of guilt complex, so be it. Call me whatever it is you want to call me. I do not care. But debate me on the merits, like what Ted's doing. Don't just take
totally.
the chicken way out and say, "Oh, you're just a racist. Screw you."
I'm all about the ideas. Name calling is always where logic and reason always goes to die. I always fear once someone starts calling me names, I kind of figure I've won the argument. that's the way I look at it.
I completely agree. I mean, because at that point you don't have an argument.
All right, everybody, we're going to leave that there. Let me sort of bring us through the usual outro stuff. Please, please, please subscribe. I've said this at the beginning of the show. I'm saying it again at the end of the show. If you're not a subscriber, either on Rumble or on YouTube, or you can do both, actually. Nobody's going to know. So please do both. Please do it. Please become a paid subscriber on Rumble. It's $5 a month. It really helps us in a big way. If you like what we're doing, find value, please help us continue. And also do chime in and get in touch. TMI show question at Yahoo. TMI show question at yahoo.com. Get in touch. You can also just send us a comment. You don't have to send us anything that we are going to run. We're fully independent here. And also if you have suggestions for things we could be doing better or how we're screwing up or whatever, do let us know. Thanks for joining us.
Please.
Thanks to Robbie West for not only for supporting and moderating the chat, but for filling in for Manila Chan. Hopefully Manila Chan will be back tomorrow, but we'll keep you posted on that either way. Please go check out the PutinBot gaming channel. That's pretty much it. Subscribe, and please support all independent news and content creators wherever you find them, even if they're illegal immigrants. Okay,
or conservatives.
I had to get it, or conservatives. All right, see you, everybody. See you tomorrow, 10 o'clock Eastern time here on the TMI show. Bye.
Have a good one, y'all.